I've decided to cut the cables between the two nubs, and we'll just cut straight along here. And the last cable to cut. On the non-motor side of the wheel, I have removed the 4 large bolts, and once you do that, it just lifts off the motor. Now the machine has been flipped over. On this side, I have removed all the screws. However, I have left the 4 motor bolts because this way the body separates from the aluminium. Lift up the body of the wheel, and then we should be able to drag. There we go. Realign the power cable. Then continue drag. There we go. So we've got that pulled out. So this whole compartment is still attached. You can see my bearings are absolutely filthy because that's just grease and dirt, which is good, which adds a protection layer. Cables are looking really nice up here. They have not been soldered yet, so we still have a lot of work to do. Just put the tire back in after sealing up the edges, and the tire does sit very flat. Can't see it from that angle. This is running on 37 psi. Just checking the alignment, and there's no rubbing on the insides where we sealed it up. As you can see, that's smooth rolling, no friction. We're looking at using the Dremel to grind down the 2 notches, and then we'll have enough space for the 2 EC5 connectors. Now that they've been nicely ground away, these connectors sit pretty good in there. Need a bit getting this area grounded down. Seems to be working. There's a fair bit more we can take off. When the EC5 is sitting flat, the slider sits just proud of it, because that fits in under there. See, that sits in snug under there. Yes, it does have a ever so slight rub on it, but it got a nice epoxy feel happening in there. It's looking really good, as we can see. Very nice. Look at that, fully sealed up. So we'll just let that dry and then come back to it in a few hours after work. What have I opted for the connection? I don't know what you call these, but they are the same as what's inside the unit, and I just did some solder joints with some heat shrink. As for the main power cables, I did go through a lot of different options, considering the XT90s. They're just so big, and then the smaller version of the XT90, which is a XT60. XT60 is really good, but it's only a 2-pin unit, and I really wanted 3. Also looking at the EC5. That's another great unit. This is the EC5 that I cut and glued together so that there is 3 pins, which is pretty cool. But going back to, really wanted the 3 pins, and a 3-pin bullet was my best option because it's the same thickness as a XT60, but in a different form factor. And on the wheel, we got the same look. Got the female end on the wheel. Can't really tell because these protrude less on the bullets, so the less chance of shorting if it touches something. And then just a bit of gasket silicone around the connector. In hindsight, I definitely would have done things a little bit different. When I get this wheel in, I'll show you what I mean by that, because I'd probably put the cable connector up here. But it's very tight in this area of what we have to work with. And if you think about it, there's a lot of space here to put like a connector, because the body frame, you can see this line here comes up here. So cutting away this joiner, which is only used for the cover plates, which is this nub here, that sits in there. There's a lot of space here that I didn't really consider using correctly, and how the cable would work. I wouldn't have cut these cables off the motor. I would have unscrewed them from the inside of the unit and then provided new cables going from the unit out here, giving me a lot more cable space to work with. Because I did cut them down here where the nubs used to sit out, I had a lot less cable to work with. But this situation seems to work, and for my first revision I'm pretty happy with it, and I'm sure going into the future I'll be opening up this unit many more times and see what you guys in the community come up with as well. The final setup that I've gone with, the 3mm bullets. The cables come out of the body of the unit and they sit underneath and they get tucked away up here, and these bullets connect here. So let me just connect these up and show you what it looks like. The cables do fit very snug. Running along is the same as before. These cables just run up. I just push this to the side. The joiner cable connector underneath. These cables just sit a little bit snug. The cover plate just sits over these and sits really nice. It's like so sturdy, there's no room for this to move. These cables are so thick. If I did it again, I'd definitely put the insulation just to sit over them, and I'd probably unwind this and rebind it. The slider does come up here and you can see it gets very close, so I did put a bit of insulation tape on that. And the only thing I've got to put on now is the plastic cover that does sit over this and protects it all, so we'll drop that on. With the cover here, I have cut it out a little bit so it can support for how it is situated. So we just cut the corner and then we broke off the tabs that run along the top here, so it just sits loose along the top. With the plate screwed down, one screw is left off because that's the screw that would sit over here. This part here is probably the most important thing because that's the lowest unit that comes close to the body, and mine does scrape a little bit. But as we can see, it is not sitting proud or anything, it is very low. The only proud area is this side of the flap that sits on the cables. But the frame that sits over there from the Y bar is well clear. I will drop on the Y bar now so you can see the spacing of everything and how this all sits. I'm very happy with it. I understand that this connector is never going to be waterproof, but I do enjoy using gasket silicone, so sealing up the ends of both connectors just to help if any water ingress. I know the join is not going to be waterproof, but I think we can get a pretty good job out of it. Got the right cover on, the left cover on. I'm about to put the slider on. You can see these cables are sitting very nice and snug in there, and plenty of room. Let's get this slider on. With the suspension in the full lowest position, you can see that there's just enough room under this. There's plenty of room actually, and the suspension never goes this low. And then as we pull it out, my suspension's really tight at the moment because I've got custom sliders. Plenty of space, so I'm happy with that. So the wheel works forward and back. That's the connector. There is a little bit of a slight gap along the cover plate just because I need to trim it a little bit where it sits on the connector here, but I'll do that later, no rush. I've discovered that the body of my unit's a bit off center, but it doesn't matter. But as the suspension goes down, we've got plenty of clearance under here, and that's all flush and no cables are near the slider, so that works really good. So I'm very happy with this, and we'll see how much longer this thing lasts going off-road because I don't think it's got much life left.